It was a summer night in July 2002 in the quiet London borough of Camden. The city slept, but inside one small flat, horror was unfolding. Andreas Hinz, a 37-year-old trainee rabbi from Germany, had come to London seeking peace, faith, and purpose. Instead, he crossed paths with Thomas Hamilton McDowell, a man whose calm demeanor hid a darkness no one could imagine. McDowell, born in Northern Ireland, was charming, quiet, and deeply disturbed. He had spent his life battling a growing hatred toward the very people who had shown him kindness. Behind his polite smile lay a storm of rage, confusion, and obsession. On July 3, 2002, that storm erupted. McDowell lured Hinz into his flat, and what happened next would shock Britain. The next day, the rabbi in training was reported missing. A week later, police discovered dismembered body parts stuffed into black bin bags floating in St. Pancras Way. The man responsible showed no remorse. During his trial, McDowell's defense argued diminished responsibility, citing childhood abuse and deep psychological damage. But psychiatrists described him as a dangerous psychopath with a hatred of homosexuals. In 2004, McDowell was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the judge declaring he might never be released, calling his crime one of the most serious and cold-blooded acts in British criminal history. This is not just the story of a murder. It's the story of a man consumed by darkness and another full of faith who became its victim. This is the haunting case of Thomas Hamilton McDowell, the Camden Ripper. Classification: murderer. Characteristics: dismemberment. Number of victims: 1. Date of murder: July. Year 2002. Date of arrest: 10 days after. Date of birth: 1977. Victim profile: Andreas Hinz, 37, gay man. Method of murder: strangulation. Location: Camden, London, England. United Kingdom. Status: sentenced to life imprisonment on September 30, 2004. Thomas McDowell, born 1977, is a convicted British murderer. McDowell was born in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, but later moved to London, England. He murdered homosexual German-born trainee rabbi Andreas Hinz, 27, in Camden on the 3rd July 2002 by strangling him before dismembering his body. At McDowell's trial 2 years later, it was revealed that he had been abused as a child and grew up with a sense of hatred towards homosexuals, as well as suffering from a personality disorder. McDowell admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility and was sentenced to life imprisonment at Southwark Crown Court on 30 September 2004. The trial judge spoke of his doubt as to whether it would ever be thought safe to release McDowell back into the community and recommended that he should never be released. He began his life sentence at Rampton Hospital in Lincolnshire. McDowell is one of around 30 prisoners currently in the prison system who have been recommended for lifelong imprisonment. In February 2007, it was reported that the European Court of Justice was reviewing such sentences to determine whether they amounted to a violation of human rights. The review has yet to be completed, but if lifelong imprisonment is outlawed, McDowell and all other prisoners serving such sentences in the UK and the rest of Europe will have their cases recalled to court for new minimum terms to be set. Failures that led to killing. Thursday, 7th October 2004. Killer Thomas McDowell was told by a judge on Thursday morning that he may never be freed from prison for the slaying of German trainee rabbi Andreas Hinz. The 37-year-old's body was found sawn up, stuffed into black bags, and dumped in St. Pancras Way, Camden Town, in July 2002. But despite the gruesome nature of the case, there will not be a Camden Ripper-style inquiry into the care and housing of father of two, McDowell's 27, a child abuse victim suffering from a dangerous personality disorder described in court as untreatable. The North London Strategic Health Authority and Camden Council currently running a behind-closed-doors probe into care and treatment received by serial murderer Anthony Hardy, the murderer who lived half a mile from McDowell, jailed last year for the killing of 3 Vice girls. Yesterday, Wednesday, were unable to confirm any involvement with Mr. Hins's killer. The New Journal has learned that drug addicts targeted vulnerable residents living in the block of flats where Mr. Hins's body was sliced into 6 parts with a razor blade and a saw. Detectives, meanwhile, have begun trawling missing person databases and checking unsolved cases for people who may have come into contact with McDowell originally from Ballymena, Northern Ireland. They have not ruled out the possibility that he may have struck on other occasions. Residents living in flats neighboring McDowell's former home at Caulfield Court in Bayne Street, Camden Town, the murder scene, said the block had a past plagued by junkies and crime. One said an all-hours crack house was operating from the building until it was finally shut down by police 6 months ago. Current tenants quizzed by the New Journal this week said the block still had an unenviable reputation. Former train driver Nigel Newman, 52, said people think that if you live here, you must be up to something. One of the flats was a crack house. It didn't bother me, but other people in the block got annoyed with everyone coming in, and there were always people trying to get in. Another resident, Neil Carroll, 46, added people used to come around ringing all the buzzers all day and night. I ended up turning my buzzer off at night. People would come round and say they had forgotten their keys and get let in and end up taking drugs in the stairwell. Caulfield Court, managed by the Irish Centre Housing Limited, was built a decade ago and officially opened by then Irish President Mary Robinson. Camden Council lost nomination rights to rooms after a dispute over interviews for places. Several of the residents are working to get their lives back on track after relationship breakdowns, homelessness, or alcohol addiction. Antonia Watson, director of Irish Centre Housing Limited, last night, Wednesday, denied there had been a crack house at the building. She said improvements have been made. Most of the tenants that live there now are new. It is permanent accommodation referred from other agencies. There was nothing that we could have done to prevent this awful case. Thomas McDowell would have been interviewed, but there was no history of violence. There were no signs. I do not know whether he was taking any medication. He was only with us for a short time, about 4 months. It has been upsetting for tenants and staff, and our thoughts go out to Andreas Hins's family. McDowell was sentenced at Southwark Crown Court on Thursday to a whole life sentence for the murder, effectively a life means life jail term. His devastated mother, Linda Hamilton, who lives in Northern Ireland, where McDowell was brought up, immediately told of her horror at the news that her son may never be released from custody. She told the Belfast Telegraph, "It is very difficult to know what to say to him. I will just be telling him that he is still my child and that I love him whatever he has done." The trial heard Mr. Hins, a gifted and popular student, had been strangled before his body had been cut up with a razor and a ripsaw borrowed from a drop-in center. Passing sentence Judge Jeffrey Rivlin QC told McDowell, "I do not know whether it will ever be thought safe to release you into the community." The defendant admitted killing Mr. Hins of Windermere Road, Finchley, after the 2 men had gone back to McDowell's flat following a fateful meeting in the popular gay pub, the Black Cap in Camden High Street, Camden Town. But although pleading guilty to manslaughter, he denied on mental health grounds the more serious charge of murder leading to a 2-week jury trial, which heard how he was badly abused as a boy and had gone through spells of drug abuse, homelessness, and mental illness. The court heard how McDowell talked about sleeping on his mother's grave even though she is still alive and still in contact with her son. Mrs. Hamilton said Thomas would never even have killed a fly when he was younger. The only way he could have done it is through illness. My son is not a monster. But leading psychiatrist Dr. Philip French from St. Mary's Hospital told the murder trial, if McDowell is a controlled psychotic who deliberately lured hens to his flat and to his death, then his responsibility is not diminished. I believe he is that controlled psychotic who did lure hens to his death and meant to kill him. Known by the nickname Tonto as a boy in recent months, he signed off letters from prison by the more sinister moniker Tommy the Hacksaw. After a jury had taken just 3 hours to dismiss McDowell's case, Judge Rivlin QC said, no one could fail to sympathize with the fact that you had an appalling childhood during which you were badly abused by a man who was subsequently sent to prison for that abuse. But he added, I must also have regard to the appalling consequences of this crime, in which you needlessly robbed a young, gifted, kind, and gentle man of his life and devastated his family and friends. The jury have had no difficulty in agreeing that you are and were a controlled psychopath, and that you present a very great and continuing danger to those who happen to come into contact with you, in particular homosexuals, as Mr. Hins was. McDowell, emotionless in the dock during sentencing, was taken to Rampton Hospital, where he will serve the first part of his sentence. A gifted, kind, and gentle man, one of the closest confidants of murder victim Andreas Hins, has appealed for friends and relatives to be left to mourn in peace, writes Richard Osley. Rabbi Michael Shire, vice principal of the Leo Bates College in Finchley, where Mr. Hins was studying, said, his loss will continue to be felt by fellow students, faculty, and congregants alike. The loss to his family is inestimable. Rabbi Shire added that the court case had been a harrowing reminder of the events of July 2002. Andreas Jonathan Hins spent much of his time with his head buried in a book, studying literature and religious tracts. It was to become a lifetime obsession. A high achiever at Wuppertal University in Germany during the 1980s, the young Mr. Hins became known for his meticulous approach to theological studies and his investigations into hidden meanings buried in ancient texts which had rarely been discussed before. His painstaking work led him to research his own family tree, during which he learned he had Jewish ancestors. Soon after this discovery, he decided to follow Judaism and became a familiar face in the European branch of the Union of Progressive Jews. He would regularly organize trips for followers under the Young and Jewish Project, which has strong membership in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and although often described as a quiet, unassuming man, was known for his passionate, confident lectures at conferences. Mr. Hins was in his late 20s when in 1993 he helped form 2 firms in Osnabrück, Germany. One was a marketing group, but the more successful Sokolo Verlag is a book publishing firm which has won awards for design and presentation. Mr. Hins ensured a share of the books were on Judaism, and the firm is still well respected in Germany's highbrow theological and literature circles. But friends and colleagues say Mr. Hins was unable to be wholly satisfied with his work at Sokolo because of a burning desire to become more involved in his religion, and in 2000 he came to England to begin his training to become a rabbi at the Leo Bates College, close to his rented home in Windermere Avenue. Openly gay, Mr. Hins involved himself in London Jewish gay and lesbian groups, members of which later attended his memorial service. His sexuality was known within the college and at the Belsize Square Synagogue in Belsize Park, where Mr. Hinz was attached. His connection with the synagogue saw him continue his lectures on Wednesday nights, drawing healthy audiences with his lively and warm teaching style. Mr. Hinz was 37 and in his second year of his rabbinical training when he was murdered. Killer of trainee rabbi gets life. Thursday, 30th of September, 2004. A psychopath who strangled and cut up a gay trainee rabbi with a ripsaw has been jailed for the rest of his life. Thomas McDowell, 27, throttled Andreas Hinz, then dumped his head, limbs, and torso in bin bags in Camden, North London. The body parts were found when the uncollected rubbish attracted flies. McDowell, born in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, was told by the judge at Southwark Crown Court he remained a serious danger to the public. McDowell suffered abuse as a child and grew up hating homosexuals, the court had been told. Dangerous psychopath. He had admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But on Wednesday, the jury found him guilty of murdering Mr. Hinz, a 27-year-old German national, on 3rd July 2002. Judge Jeffrey Rivlin, QC, told McDowell the only appropriate sentence was one in which he would spend his whole life in prison. "You are a dangerous psychopath. There are no two ways about it," he said. Judge Rivlin accepted McDowell had suffered abuse at the hands of a man who was later jailed. He told McDowell it was not his fault he had developed a serious personality disorder. But he said McDowell remained a danger, particularly to homosexuals. There are features of this case which, in my judgment, make it one of the more serious and which, first and foremost, calls for the protection of the public. "I do not know whether it will ever be thought safe to release you into the community," said Judge Rivlin, giving a whole life order. McDowell was taken from the court to Rampton High Security Hospital, where he will serve the first part of his sentence in the personality disorder unit. In the end, justice caught up with Thomas Hamilton McDowell, but it brought little peace. In 2004, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for the brutal murder of Andreas Hinz, the 37-year-old rabbinical student who came to London seeking hope, not horror. The court called the act monstrous, a killing so cold and deliberate that it defied comprehension. Yet even as McDowell was led away in handcuffs, one question still haunted everyone who followed the case. Why? Why would a man raised in the same society, surrounded by the same faith and humanity, descend into such darkness? Psychiatrists describe McDowell as a psychopath, a man with no empathy, whose life was marked by rejection, hatred, and confusion about his identity. He targeted Hinz not out of impulse, but out of deep-rooted anger. Some said it was internalized homophobia. Others called it evil in its purest form. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. A bright, kind, compassionate man lost his life in a way no human being should. The murder of Andreas Hinz wasn't just a crime against one person. It was a wound in the heart of a community, a reminder that even in cities filled with light, shadows still linger. For the Jewish and LGBTQ+ communities in London, the case became a rallying cry for awareness, compassion, and justice. McDowell remains in prison, reportedly showing little remorse. The judge who sentenced him said he might never be released, that he posed a continuing danger to the public. And yet no sentence, no number of years can undo what was done in that Camden flat. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides in the most ordinary of faces, the ones we pass every day on the street. The story of Thomas McDowell is a reminder that hatred left unchecked can turn into horror, and that compassion, even in tragedy, remains humanity's only redemption. If this story moved you, Subscribe for more true crime documentaries that reveal the darkness we fear and the truth we can't ignore.